A fascinating cruise travels across numerous rivers, canals and lakes within the heart of the former Tsars' realm. Past monasteries and timber-built churches to as far as Saint Petersburg. Our journey begins in Moscow, capital of Russia and the largest city in Europe. Both Tsarist rule and Soviet communism gave the city its present-day appearance. The famous Red Square, with the Resurrection Gate, Cheremark on the ground, and Marshal Zhukov on his horse located on a monument of honor. Next to it, the Alexander Garden with trees, roses and fountains. From here, the Kremlin can be entered via a gateway to the Trinity Tower. The word Kremlin means fortress, most famous of which is here in Moscow. Cathedral Square is in the center of the Kremlin, whose oldest cathedral is the Uspenskaya Sobor. In the Kremlin, Russian history was irreversibly influenced when the members of Russia's royal family were assassinated. Tsar Peter the Great witnessed this event and subsequently founded Saint Petersburg. But the city's history began with the construction of the Kremlin. It lay at the very heart of the city and was for centuries Russia's spiritual and political center. The symbiosis of both church and state made the existence of Russia possible. A pedestrian area is the heart of the Arbat district. Here once lived great artists such as Pushkin and Gogol in aristocratic surroundings. Moscow has witnessed much change and has become a prosperous city and one of both contrast and the superlative. Redeemer Cathedral was dismantled to make way for the Congress Palace. However, it was later rebuilt. In the Tverskaya district, Moscow's theatre scene is to be found in and around Theatre Square, dominated by the Bolshoi Theatre. The new Virgin Monastery is the largest and most beautiful monastery in Moscow. With the Mother of God of Smolensk, 15 buildings form an enchanting town, newly renovated and located close to the river. The transformation of this huge metropolis becomes even more apparent when viewed from the spurling mountains. That communism will remain in the people's minds for many years to come is augmented by the ostentatious buildings that were built with much political arrogance and overstatement. The Donskoye Monastery originated in a church in which Tsar Fedor Ivanovich placed an icon of the Virgin Mary, and from where an attack of the Crim Tatars was thwarted. The Danilov Monastery is the oldest in Moscow. Indeed, it was the first monastery that, at the end of the Soviet era, was handed back to the church on its 100th anniversary. From the 15th century, Kolomenskaya was the summer residence of Moscow's royal families and later the Tsars. Famous wooden buildings from all over Russia were brought here and built around the Christi Ascension Church. And the impressive main entrance to Tsar Alexiev's palace was also included. Around 70 kilometers north of Moscow is the monastery town of Sergijev Posad. In the 14th century, one of the centers of the Russian Orthodox Church originated here. It is a living sanctuary of the Russian Orthodox Christians. The northern stone harbor on the Moskva resembles a river steamer with 2 decks and a bridge. After the provisions are loaded, passengers are allowed to board and duly check in at reception. Soon the command "cast off" is heard and the boat begins its journey. It travels past several cruise ships. On board, the captain welcomes his guests. Na zdrowie! Then a meal is served. Next morning we travel past the bell tower of Kalyasin, while on the bridge the captain and crew attend to their duties. A large lock must be navigated. From Dubna, the boat travels on the upper sections of the Volga. Uglich, our first port of call. Daily, boats bring tourists here from each corner of the world to visit this place of colourful Russian history. The Dmitrievskaya church is crowned with blue, onion-shaped domes that are adorned with stars. The red colour of the church is a symbol of bloodshed. The incidents that once occurred at this place of death gave rise to a time of confusion. The interior features religious frescoes and a huge icon that shines out in a golden frame. Everywhere there are illustrations of the mysterious death of the heir to the throne on the 15th of May, 1591. The bells were ringing loudly when the 8-year-old Tsarevich had a fatal so-called accident, allegedly while at play. When Tsar Ivan the Terrible died, his wife and son Dmitri moved to Uglich. Dmitri was an intelligent child and grew up under the care of his mother, while his insane brother Fyodor Ivanovich was duly crowned and represented by Boris Godunov. Everyone knew that Godunov wanted to become Tsar, so news of the death of the Tsar's son came as a surprise. The Muscovite governors were killed, and the Uglich bell was symbolically removed. Prior to this event, Uglich enjoyed national importance as a major trading center and manufactured its own coinage. Its people lived a peaceful life. Sovereign Andrea erected a Kremlin that was typical of old Russian cities, a walled fortress with watchtowers, palace, cathedral, and various additional buildings. The ship gradually leaves the harbour and journeys into the evening. By way of a concert, the passengers are introduced to Russia's musical soul. Singing accompanied by both balalaika and accordion, which all make the vodka particularly authentic. Next morning we have reached the Rybinska water reservoir, and the trip on the Volga is now really well and truly underway. Again, the passengers go ashore. Yaroslavl, one of the oldest trading cities on the Volga, with numerous monasteries and churches. Grand Duke Yaroslavl erected a fortress here in around 1010 AD and laid the foundation stone for the city of the same name that is older than Moscow. The Redeemer Monastery is protected by sturdy walls and for a long period was both the cultural and spiritual center of the city. A picturesque ensemble, almost monumental, whose towers and adornments can be seen from a distance. The many churches indicate wealth and religious faith. However, times here were once treacherous. Thus the monasteries had to be defended. As wooden buildings could be set on fire from the 13th century, stone was used instead. At the beginning of the 17th century, the city was the second largest in Russia, and the merchants and nobles had their villas built according to Russian classical design. Trade in agricultural products, fish and linen introduced a golden age. In a radial shape, 7 streets lead to the central square of the old city centre, in which the Prophet Elias Church is situated. A rich merchant's family commissioned this work of art that, due to its beauty, became the central feature of the city. After a night on board, the next morning takes us to Rostov Velikij, an old Boyar town on Nero Lake. The Rostover Kremlin is the town's main landmark. A closed complex, as if from a Russian fairy tale. Ecclesiastical splendour beyond white walls. However, no worldly sovereign lived here, only the metropolitan bishop. In the middle of the 17th century, a religious war broke out. Following many struggles for power, Iona Sisoyevich ordered that the Kremlin castle be built. The Cathedral of the Dormition and Bell Wall flank Cathedral Square. At the western wall is the Evangelist Johannes Church. The walls of its interior are covered with paintings that create an atmospheric solemnity with all of their abundant colour. A number of the motifs indicate that in the 17th century, Western ideas were not at all welcome. And finally, the Redeemer Church. This is a kind of private chapel that is situated opposite Red Square, where Bishop Iona welcomed his important guests and organized various concerts. Today all is peaceful, and it is as though Rostov Velikij grieves for the bygone times of its former greatness. At noon, the boat sets off again and travels along the Volga back to the Rybinska Reservoir, past numerous colourful monasteries. On the bridge, everyone is alert. Nothing is left to chance. Soon after the town of Rybinsk, we encounter a large lock, the entrance to the huge reservoir. Here the water is 14 meters deep. A large number of villages had to be flooded in order to create the reservoir. We travel across the reservoir into the evening. At noon the next day, the boat passes by small buildings and a nunnery on the banks of the Sexna that became the Volga-Baltic Canal. The ship berths in the village of Goritzy. Here we visit typical tiny wooden houses, a captivating sight. A rural idyll far from city life, with small vegetable gardens and colourfully painted facades. A place of calm and tranquility. Close by is Kirillov, a town that was built around a monastery that was founded by a monk, Kirill Beroseskaya. High walls and fortified churches frame a large inner courtyard, a bastion of religion, and at the same time the economic and cultural centre of the region. Dormition Church was the monastery complex's first building. It all began here. In Old Rus, the monasteries played an important role for the Christianization of the heathen tribes and brought about a spiritual revival. When St. Kirill died at the age of 90, the monastery had 53 monks and was a place of pilgrimage. At the beginning of the 17th century, the monastery possessed more than 600 villages and became an important landowner with worldly power. In 1919, the monastery was disappropriated and became a protected monument. But today, parts of it once again belong to the Russian Orthodox Church. In the afternoon, the boat leaves Goritzy and travels on the Kovcha that forms part of the Volga-Baltic Canal. We cross the White Lake, and the Grochino Church points the way. Next day, we reach the huge Onyega Lake and Kizhi Island. In 1951, an open-air museum of old Russian wooden architecture was built here. The main attraction is a wonderful sight. Two huge wooden churches, one for summer, one for winter, and in between, a wooden bell tower. Not a single nail was used for its construction, and its many domes are covered with aspen wood. 80 carpenters are thought to have worked on the construction of this large cathedral between 1707 and 1714. There were no plans, only skill, expert knowledge, and a very good understanding of timber. Thus, a unique monument was built. The width of the interior is overwhelming. The annexes blend in with the main area and create an atmospheric whole. Coloured battens separate the picture wall, and a wooden door leads to a sanctuary. Around 60 wooden buildings were relocated here, and a museum village created as an image of a bygone time. Since the 16th century, the island was the centre of the Spasskaya Pogost that contained 120 villages. But hardly anything remains of that period. Windmills were also brought to the museum island, and they make a fascinating display. Powered by the wind, the mill house turns with the wheel. Many of these outstanding masterpieces are to be seen on this museum island. They make up the world-famous ensemble of Kizhi, the largest wooden churches in Russia. In the evening, the boat crosses Nero Lake, accompanied by a romantic sunset. Now a short visit to the engine room, the heart of the boat. There are numerous locks. Now it's our last evening on board the boat. The captain's dinner is the culinary highlight of the journey. The following morning, we arrive at our final destination, the new capital of Tsar Peter the Great. Saint Petersburg, the Venice of the North. Once splendid buildings originated here, such as the Winter Palace and the Eremitage, the largest museum in Russia. From the time of Peter the Great, the Russian rulers acquired much art. Since 1922, the collections and the Winter Palace have been open to the public. When in 1703 St. Petersburg was founded in the swampy delta of the Neva, no one could imagine that such splendid buildings would one day be built here. From each corner of the country, labourers were brought here to battle metre for metre in order to retrieve dry land from the swamp. 24,000 tree stumps were used for the foundation of Isaac's Cathedral. This splendid St. Petersburg monument can accommodate a congregation of 14,000. At the widest part of the Neva is the regal and dominant Peter and Paul fortress. Peter I wanted to protect his capital city from Sweden and to guard the passage to the East Sea. At the center of the fortress is the Peter and Paul Cathedral, the final resting place of the Tsars, and until 1858, the city's main church. In just a few months, more than 20,000 workers created the load-bearing foundation of this hexagonal building. The fortress never came under attack. The aristocracy did not support the creation of a new city in the remote northwest of the country, also threatened by the Swedes. Many aristocrats were forced to settle there, and the people were extremely wary. Tsar Peter the Great had a resolute reverence towards the West. He also had a vision of a palace outside the city, which would be more beautiful than anything else. Thus, the Grand Palace of Peterhof was built, the Versailles of the East. The Tsar himself chose its location and sketched designs for both park and palace. Landward, the Baroque estate is entered via the Parade Gate and Upper Park, at the center of which is the Neptune Fountain. But more impressive, and therefore more prestigious, was the arrival of guests from the sea. Here is the Great Cascade, one of the most beautiful and perhaps the largest display of fountains in the world, and symbol of Russia's newly gained naval power. A unique waterway connects the Tsars cities of Moscow and St. Petersburg across the heart of Russia. A most beautiful route traveling rivers, canals and lakes in the atmospheric wake of the Russian soul.